الله. سورة الواقعة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة رافعة إذا رجت الأرض رجا وبست الجبال بسا فكانت هباء منبثا وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثة فأصحاب الميمنة ما أصحاب الميمنة وأصحاب المشأمة ما أصحاب المشأمة والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون في جنات النعيم ثلة من الأولين وقليل من الآخرين على سرر موضونة متكئين عليها متقابلين يطوف عليهم ولدان مخلدون بأكواب وأباريق وكأس من معين لا يصدعون عنها ولا ينزفون وفاكهة مما يتخيرون ولحم طير مما يشتهون وحور عين كأمثال اللؤلؤ المكنون جزاء بما كانوا يعملون لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا تأثيما إلا قيلا سلاما سلاما وأصحاب اليمين ما أصحاب اليمين في سدر مخضود وطلح منضود وظل ممدود وماء مسكوب وفاكهة كثيرة لا مقطوعة ولا ممنوعة وفرش مرفوعة إنا أنشأناهن إنشاء فجعلناهن أبكارا عربا أترابا لأصحاب اليمين ثلة من الأولين وثلة من الآخرين وأصحاب الشمال ما أصحاب الشمال في سموم وحميم وظل من يحموم لا بارد ولا كريم إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك مترفين وكانوا يصرون على الحنث العظيم وكانوا يقولون أئذا متنا وكنا ترابا وعظاما أئنا لمبعوثون أو آباؤنا الأولون قل إن الأولين والآخرين لمجموعون إلى ميقات يوم معلوم ثم إنكم أيها الضالون المكذبون لآكلون من شجر من زقوم فمالئون منها البطون فشاربون عليه من الحميم فشاربون شرب الهيم هذا نزلهم يوم الدين نحن خلقناكم فلولا تصدقون أفرأيتم ما تمنون أأنتم تخلقونه أم نحن الخالقون نحن قدرنا بينكم الموت وما نحن بمسبوقين على أن نبدل أمثالكم وننشئكم فيما لا تعلمون ولقد علمتم النشأة الأولى فلولا تذكرون أفرأيتم ما تحرثون أأنتم تزرعونه أم نحن الزارعون لو نشاء لجعلناه حطاما فظلتم تفكهون إنا لمغرمون بل نحن محرومون أفرأيتم الماء الذي تشربون أأنتم أنزلتموه من المزن أم نحن المنزلون لو نشاء جعلناه أجاجا فلولا تشكرون أفرأيتم النار التي تورون أأنتم أنشأتم شجرتها أم نحن المنشئون نحن جعلناها تذكرة ومتاعا للمقوين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم فلا أقسم بمواقع النجوم وإنه لقسم لو تعلمون عظيم إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون تنزيل من رب العالمين أفبهذا الحديث أنتم مدهنون وتجعلون رزقكم أنكم تكذبون فلولا إذا بلغت الحلقوم وأنتم حينئذ تنظرون ونحن أقرب إليه منكم ولكن لا تبصرون فلولا إن كنتم غير مدينين ترجعونها إن كنتم صادقين فأما إن كان من المقربين فروح وريحان وجنة نعيم وأما إن كان من أصحاب اليمين فسلام لك من أصحاب اليمين وأما إن كان من المكذبين الضالين فنزل من حميم وتصلية جحيم إن هذا لهو حق اليقين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم صدق الله العلي العظيم
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات ومن مات على الهدى والإيمان بالخصوص إلى أرواح أموات جماعتنا الحاضرين السامعين نهدي للجميع ثواب سورة المباركة الفاتحة تسبقها الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فاتحة.
खुशनुदी मोहम्मद वाले बैत मोहम्मद सलवात।
बारे दिगर सलवात।
सल्ले अला मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद।
बराए खुशनुदी मोहम्मद वाल मोहम्मद बाबा बुलंद सलावत।
अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद।
जश्न ज़हरा का जब मनाते हैं अर्श वाले भी सुनने आते हैं। जश्न ज़हरा का जब मनाते हैं अर्श वाले भी सुनने आते हैं। ये वो मिदहत है जिसको सुनने को ये वो मिदहत है जिसको सुनने को 14 तारे ज़मीं पे आते हैं। जश्न ज़हरा का जब मनाते हैं अर्श वाले भी सुनने आते हैं। आज पूरी हुई नबी की दुआ दिल का अरमान अब हुआ पूरा। आज पूरी हुई नबी की दुआ दिल का अरमान अब हुआ पूरा। दिल का अरमान अब हुआ पूरा। ताना अब तरकाब न दे कोई खुद नबी कह के मुस्कुराते हैं। जश्न ज़हरा का जब मनाते हैं अर्श वाले भी सुनने आते हैं। और बोले राहिब मुकाबला न करो ऐसे चेहरों का सामना न करो। बोले राहिब मुकाबला न करो ऐसे चेहरों का सामना न करो। ऐसे चेहरों का सामना न करो। रेजा रेजा पहाड़ हो जाए एक इशारा जो इनका पाते हैं। रेजा रेजा पहाड़ हो जाए एक इशारा जो इनका पाते हैं। जश्न ज़हरा का जब मनाते हैं अर्श वाले भी सुनने आते हैं। थे किसा में रसूल और इमाम ज़हरा तेरा मगर अलग है मकाम। थे किसा में रसूल और इमाम ज़हरा तेरा मगर अलग है मकाम। ज़हरा तेरा मगर अलग है मकाम। तू तारुफ के सब का ज़रिया है मरकज़ी नूर तुझको पाते हैं। जश्न ज़हरा का जब मनाते हैं अर्श वाले भी सुनने आते हैं। बात ज़हरा ने जो अगर कह दी, हुक्म बन कर वो अर्श पर पहुंची। बात ज़हरा ने जो अगर कह दी, हुक्म बन कर वो अर्श पर पहुंची। हुक्म बन कर वो अर्श पर पहुंची। तेरे बच्चों के ईद के कपड़े, फिर तो रिजवान इसको लाते हैं। तेरे बच्चों के ईद के कपड़े, फिर तो रिजवान इसी के लाते हैं। जश्न ज़हरा का जब मनाते हैं, अर्श वाले भी सुनने आते हैं। और तेरे दर के गुलाम हैं सारे, हूँ वो जिन्नो बशर फलक वाले। तेरे दर के गुलाम हैं सारे, हो वो जिन्नो बशर फलक वाले। हो वो जिन्नो बशर फलक वाले। तेरे दर से तो रोटियां लेने अर्श वाले ज़मीं पे आते हैं। जश्न ज़हरा का जब मनाते हैं, अर्श वाले भी सुनने आते हैं। और जिक्र दोज़ख न फिक्र जन्नत है, तेरे बच्चों से गर मुहब्बत है। जिक्र दोज़ख न फिक्र जन्नत है, तेरे बच्चों से गर मुहब्बत है। तेरे बच्चों से गर मुहब्बत है। जब भी जाते हैं करबला ज़हरा, अपनी जन्नत ज़मीं पे पाते हैं। जश्न ज़हरा का जब मनाते हैं, अर्श वाले भी सुनने आते हैं। पर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद हक बयानी हुसैन देते हैं। हक बयानी हुसैन देते हैं। जिंदगानी हुसैन देते हैं। जिंदगानी हुसैन देते हैं। और अपनी दहलीज के फकीरों को, अपने दहलीज के फकीरों को हुक्मरानी हुसैन देते हैं। हुक्मरानी हुसैन देते हैं। जिंदगानी हुसैन देते हैं। जिंदगानी हुसैन देते हैं। और सबको लंगर अली से मिलता है। सबको लंगर अली से मिलता है। और पानी हुसैन देते हैं। और पानी हुसैन देते हैं। जिंदगानी हुसैन देते हैं। जिंदगानी हुसैन देते हैं। जो ज़ईफ़ी में ढल नहीं सकती, जो ज़ईफ़ी में ढल नहीं सकती, वो जवानी हुसैन देते हैं, वो जवानी हुसैन देते हैं, जिंदगानी हुसैन देते हैं, जिंदगानी हुसैन देते हैं, हक बयानी हुसैन देते हैं, हक बयानी हुसैन देते हैं, जिंदगानी हुसैन देते हैं। इसका गम है इलाज है गम का, इसका गम है इलाज है गम का, शादमानी हुसैन देते हैं, शादमानी हुसैन देते हैं, जिंदगानी हुसैन देते हैं, जिंदगानी हुसैन देते हैं। और हुर अलैहि सलाम बनता है, हुर अलैहि सलाम बनता है, जब निशानी हुसैन देते हैं, जब निशानी हुसैन देते हैं, जिंदगानी हुसैन देते हैं, हक बयानी हुसैन देते हैं। बर मोहम्मद वाले
Please recite a loud salawat. Is there anybody else who can recite in the language of Persian? Just Google.
So Eid-e-Zehra Mubarak, and according to Maulana will more light on there, that there are 72 names for Eid-e-Zehra according to the hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam, and one is Yawmul Eid al Bayt and Yawmul Eid Surur. So this besides, so there are few different couplets in Urdu. I'm going to recite those, but it will be not in a tune, but it will be just Tahtul Lafz. So मिट गया दुनिया से मिटाने वाला, मिट गया दुनिया से मिटाने वाला, आज भी बाकी है इस्लाम बचाने वाला। अपना मुंह काला किया फिरते हैं वो दुनिया में, थोड़ा सा तबर्रा होना जरूरी है। अपना मुंह काला किया फिरते हैं वो दुनिया में, दर बदर आले पैगंबर को फिराने वाला। होगी किसी की ईद किसी मेहरबां के साथ, नौहा गुनाह है कोई जमीनो जमा के साथ, बैठे हैं रह गुजर इसी इंतजार में, बैठे हैं रह गुजर भी इसी इंतजार में, हम सब की ईद होगी इमाम जमा के साथ। 2 महीने 8 दिनों तक उनके मसाइब पर रोए हैं, वो आज खुश हुए तो जमाने की ईद है। या रब न मोमिनों की खुशी को नजर लगे, ज़हरा के सोगवार घराने की ईद है। गुलशन में बाहर जैसे कि लौट आई है, अभी मुख्तार ने खबर कुछ ऐसी सुनाई है। खिलखिलाओ के आज ईद है तुम्हारी हुसैनियों, बिनते ज़हरा आज फिर से मुस्कुराई है। सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि
So I request Maulana.
If anybody else wanted to recite any poem, any couplet, so I request Maulana Shabir Kimani to have a shower more light on today's Eid-e-Zehra through his lecture. Salawat bar Muhammad Zali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بقية الله خير لكم إن كنتم مؤمنين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, here in Milwaukee, across the globe, wherever you're hearing my voice, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: who is the Hussein of my time? Who is the Hussein of our time? We've been discussing, and last night we began a discussion on Eid-e-Zehra, or as we call it, Farhat al-Zahra, that is the happiness of Zahra. And we are commemorating this moment, and as the brother alluded to, there are numerous names for this particular occasion. And we mentioned some of those incidents that took place and what historians and the ulama say occurred, and what are the things that we bring together to commemorate. And there are some things that we say, and there are some things that we do not say, and because of the time and the space. And there are many things. At the end of the day, the short of the story is we commemorate the happiness in the household of Fatima al-Zahra. And that is the most important element of the equation. You see, Fatima al-Zahra is that individual, that entity, that personality, who her true persona, her true position and maqam is not known in this dunya, it's not known in this world. It will be known in the akhirah, it will be known in the hereafter. That's why we are told that Fatima al-Zahra's her personality, her position, her stature has been secret in this world. In fact, that's why we're told وَسَرَّ الْمُسْتَوْدَعَ فِيهَا, that there is a secret with which she is buried, that is not known in this dunya. It will be known in the hereafter. That is, in the brief moments in the life that Fatima al-Zahra lived on this planet, it will become apparent to the world how complete and comprehensive. How do we get light into this? How do we get a glimpse into this? Because we have the riwayah and the tradition from Imam al-Askari, who we commemorated a few nights ago, where he says that we, the Ahlul Bayt, the Imams, are a hujjah on the people. And our grandmother Fatima al-Zahra is a hujjah on us. You see, the Imams are the Imams, but the Imam who is Ma'asum is telling you and I that if there is a hujjah on them, it is their grandmother Fatima al-Zahra. This is a secret that you and I can spend our whole lives analyzing. We will not get to the depth of it, because it's a secret. But what we know and we need to focus on is Fatima al-Zahra's personality is too exalted. I mentioned last night that Ayatollah Bahjat, when he was asked about what should we discuss on Eid-e-Zehra, he said you should discuss Fatima al-Zahra as much as possible. And inshallah we will shed some light as much as we can tonight. But there's another very important element of tonight and Eid-e-Zehra at large that we need to commemorate. And that is the Hussein of our time. That is the Imam of our time. That is the one who is in ghaiba, which we say that is an occultation. What is my relationship with this individual, with this entity, with the Imam of my time? There was an Amir al-Mu'mineen, an Imam, that is our Imam, which is Amir al-Mu'mineen, of his time and space, which we still benefit from till this day. There was a Hussein that we still benefit from this day. But the Ahlul Bayt have said that in the traditions of Rasulullah are clear, accepted by all Muslims. That Rasulullah has categorically said, "Man mata wa lam ya'rif imama zamanihi, mata mitatan jahiliyyah." The one who dies without recognition, without ma'rifah, without cognizance of the Imam of their time, dies a death of ignorance, jahiliyyah. But what? Which death of ignorance? That they didn't know? No. The ulama say this would be as if you were at the time of ignorance in jahiliyyah and Islam has just come forward. And at that time, on one side, Rasulullah is propagating the truth of Islam and you are rejecting Islam. This is the level and the status in terms of what the riwayat and narrations have told us with respect to the importance of developing a relationship with the Imam of our time. Therefore, in the brief moments that we have together, I want to look at a few things that we can lay out the foundations. We want to celebrate and commemorate Eid-e-Zehra, but at the same time, we have to give some messages to understand what our future looks like. Therefore, in the brief moments that we have together, I want to look at a few things. That is, what is the position and the respect to environment? What is the importance and the significance of the environment in which we exist? The discussion we started last night. What is the relationship of Eid-e-Zehra with the personality and persona of Fatimah al-Zahra? What is the relationship and connection of Eid-e-Zehra with the Imam of our time, with Imam Sahib al-Zaman? Why is it so important to develop a relationship with this Imam? And what jewels and wisdom can we get from the personality of the Imam? At the next level, what are some of the challenges that we have during the period of occultation of the ghaibat of the Imam? And what is our duty and responsibility during the ghaibat of the Imam? And what are we to do? And finally, one of the elements that we'll look at is, what am I and you? What does the future of our community look like? Not 5, 10 years down the line, but 10, 15, 20 years down the line, and what are we doing about it now? This is our agenda for the brief moments that we are together. Wherever you are, here in Milwaukee or across the globe, from the bottom of your heart, send a salawat on Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Last night we began a discussion talking about the impact of environment, and we said if you come from the subcontinent, for example India, Pakistan, this area, or for example you historically come from Persia, for example, or for example if you come from the Middle East, that environment may have an impact on you whether you realize it or not. And one of the elements that we're facing in our world is our world has an impact. Sometimes we know it, sometimes we don't know it. I'll give you an example. Right now, the Nobel Prize is being given and have been given in different fields. For example, in chemistry and biology and economics was just given recently. And these are given every year. And this gives us pause for a moment to think about our lives. That is, what are we doing with our lives? You know, Imam al-Askari, who we commemorated a few nights ago, the father of the Imam of our time, he says, look, your days, your lives are short. Hadith from Imam Askari. Your lives are short and your days are few. And death comes unexpectedly, Imam Askari says. He says, whoever sows, you know, seeds, you put seeds in the ground. Whoever sows good, they will reap happiness. They will harvest happiness. Whoever sows evil will reap regret. Therefore, whoever sows something, they reap what they sow. This is what the Imam says. Now, within this is such wisdom that you and I cannot even consider. Why? Because the secret of success in this dunya and the akhirat is in this statement. Why? You want the answer? In the akhirah it's clear. You don't want death, or you don't want regret on your deathbed. But in this dunya, what's the secret? Do you know the likes of Jeff Bezos? You've heard of Jeff Bezos, Amazon, wealthiest person. Him and Elon Musk, they go back and forth, wealthiest person in the world. Jeff Bezos was on Wall Street and he was doing very well for himself. He's making plenty of money. And he was young. He graduated from Princeton, went to Wall Street in New York, did really well. But at some point in time, he read a book called Remains of the Day. And this was a book that opened his eyes. And in this book, the character in the book, at the end of his life, he spent his whole life doing something. At the end of his life, he faced immense regret. He said, I wasted my life. At that point in time, Jeff Bezos realized that if I do what I'm doing for the rest of my life, at the end of my life, I will have some regret. So he said he packed up everything and he moved westbound to Seattle, Washington. And he built Amazon from there. And you'll find many of the people who are successful from the worldly perspective, they project themselves at the end of their life and they go in reverse and see where do I want to end up. By the way, this is the same secret that will help you in the akhirah. They say, Al-Allama Tabatabai Sahib Tafsir al-Mizan, a man, he's in his final moments. A man saves his last breath for the most valuable lesson in life. We're told that Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he's in his final moments, Imam Ali, on the 21st of Ramadan, he says to his children and those who are around him, he says, Allah, Allah fil Quran. Allah, Allah, point of emphasis, he's emphasizing. Allah, Allah fil Quran. Allah, Allah fil Aitam. That is, Allah, Allah, don't forget the Quran. Allah, Allah, don't forget the orphans. Allah, Allah fil Masakin. Don't forget the poor people in your society. What is Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen saying? Similarly, they say, Allama Tabatabai, in his final moments, he's saying, Muraqaba, 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 Muhasaba, Muhasaba, Muhasaba. Meaning what? In your final moments, at the end of the day, analyze every single day. Did what I did this day, was it good or bad? If it was good, how can I do more of it and better of it? And if it was bad, spiritually, how can I correct it and go in the right direction? This is the secret to improve in life. You and I, individually, we have to improve, and societally, we have to improve. But if we don't know what are the things that are impacting our minds, then how will we progress? Alfred Nobel, do you know how the Nobel Prize was established? Alfred Nobel made his money, do you know how he was a chemist? He made his money selling dynamite, you know, TNT, explosives? That's how he made his money. His brother was very ill in France. Alfred Nobel was alive. His brother became very ill in France. When he became very ill in France, he was about to die. When he was about to die, his brother eventually died. When his brother died, in the newspapers, it was published the next day, and all the newspapers in Europe are reading and the world is reading. What is the title of the newspaper? It said, "The Merchant of Death has died." Alfred Nobel got a shock because he realized this headline was not for his brother, it was for him. They mistakenly thought that Alfred Nobel himself had died. And they published, "The Merchant of Death has died." He got a shock that I'm going to die, and when I die, people are going to remember me as someone who profited and made money off of other people's deaths. He established the Nobel Prize. You see, Rasulullah says, "Mutu qabla an tamutu." Die before you die. What is this? What is Rasulullah saying in this wisdom saying of spirituality? The first death, the second death. The second death, Ya Rasulullah, I understand, we will all go into the grave and our bodies will perish. But what is the first death that you are saying? Die before you die. You will find that's the death of the ego. Nobel Prize Alfred Nobel realized he was able to die before he died because he saw the newspaper headline. But many of us, we don't see the newspaper headline every single day. To reflect on what is it that we will be remembered at the end of the day. Do you think you will be remembered at the end of your life? Imam Askari's hadith, I'm still explaining. Will you be remembered at the end of your life for example, making money? So many people came, they made money, nobody remembers them. Will you be remembered, for example, for having a nice house and nice car? These are all nice things. But will you be remembered for them? No. Many people had nice... The models of cars change every day. The models of houses, things change every day. Those things won't remember. What will you be remembered? You will be remembered for the service you did for humanity. What you did for others. You will be remembered for the knowledge that you left behind. Doesn't Amir al-Mu'mineen say this? Amir al-Mu'mineen says, how many of those people who are still alive are those who wrote books many years ago? The people of knowledge remain alive. So those things will remain. Wealth, unless you spend it in God's way or in a good way, it won't help you much. So understand and project yourself at the end of your life and see, what is it? Do you know what the number one regret that Americans have on their deathbed is? According to statistics, the number one regret that people have on their deathbed in America is, I wish I spent more time with my family. You see, in our world, we live in an individualistic society. And that has an impact on us. It has pros and it has cons. It has positives and it has negatives. Positives of individual societies are this. As an individual, you maximize your potential. So for example, if you want to be an economist, a doctor, a physician, and you have to go across the way to the West Coast, you are encouraged to do that. Doesn't matter what happens to your family or your loved ones. If it's in your best interest as an individual, you're supposed to do it. But in community society, it's a bit different. So we need to understand our impact of our world. Why am I saying this? Noise. A book I recommend you read, it just came out in 2021. It's written by Dr. Daniel Kahneman. Dr. Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in economics a few years ago. He won the prize in economics, although he was a psychologist. His first book is called Thinking Fast and Slow. I also recommend that book. In Thinking Fast and Slow, Dr. Daniel Kahneman applies psychology to economics. Stay with me here, please. He applies psychology to economics. Because in economics, there was a fundamental assumption that people are rational actors. Iqtisad, economics. And in the same way, he said that people are not rational. In fact, we are predictably irrational. And he said we have two systems in our brain, system 1 and system 2. System 1 can be called the emotional brain, and system 2 can be called the logical brain. System 1 can, for example, be called that brain which is the limbic system, the amygdala, the emotional parts of the brain, and the rational brain, which is the frontal lobe or the prefrontal cortex especially. This is what would be called what enables us to be ashraful makhluqat, that is the best of Allah's creation, if we utilize the logical part of our brain. So that's his first book. The second book is what I want to focus on, which came out this year. Dr. Daniel Kahneman and his co-authors share a very interesting study there. What is the study? And this will help you, especially my young ones, when you go to apply for universities. When you go to apply to Marquette and University of Wisconsin or Stanford, MIT, wherever you apply. Before you go, remember, check the weather. Check the weather, why? Dr. Daniel Kahneman and his research colleagues, they cited a study and they found that two identical candidates on paper, same GPA, same test scores, same credentials, same everything. In fact, same answers when they go into the interview, everything the same. They got different results. And consistently they got different results. One got accepted, one got rejected. What was the difference? Dr. Daniel Kahneman cited the study that you send the same identical candidates on paper, everything's the same. They go into the interviewer's office, one gets accepted, one gets denied. They give the same answers, they have everything the same. What happened? What was the difference? Dr. Daniel Kahneman said the difference, according to the study, was the weather outside when they left. What? The weather outside, they said if it was sunny when the candidate left the office and it was sunny outside, they got admission. And if it was raining outside, they got denied. Why? The weather had an impact on the interviewer, the person who was asking the questions. You have ever heard of seasonal depression? It happens in Seattle and other places that are cloudy. Why am I sharing this with you? The reason I'm mentioning this to you, these are things, if you ask the person who was asking the questions, the interviewer, he would never think that the weather had an impact. He would deny it, in fact. But there are things that impact our decision making that we don't even realize. These are subconscious things that you don't even realize. Let alone those things that impact you here and here. Now come back to the question that we mentioned the night before. If you are in Pakistan and India, there are different issues that you're facing. If you are in, for example, Persia, there are different issues that you're facing. If you're in Iraq or the Middle East, for example, there are different issues you're facing. Here we have different issues that we're facing. For example, we mentioned, for example, in a place like Pakistan or India, for example, in the Muslim community there, is there a debate on, for example, Allah in the practicing community? No. Everyone already believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is there a, by the way, atheism is rising there as well. That's a separate discussion. But what I'm saying is because the world is global now. You can't hide anything. We live in a global environment. But in the practicing community, you don't have to start from scratch with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's accepted as granted. Do you debate on Rasulullah in a place like Pakistan, for example, where the 96% of the population is already Muslim? No, because everyone accepts Rasulullah as the final prophet with the exception of some few people. So there's no debate. The debate starts on who? Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali, is he Khalifatahu bila fasl, and these types of discussions emerge. Now if you come to, for example, Persia now, today in the modern world, is the majority Shia. It wasn't always like that. It wasn't always like that. In fact, many of the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah, Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, these types, Bukhara is in a modern day Uzbekistan. That was part of the Persian continent, or the Persian world. So these people were not always Shias. Shiaism emerged when? During the time, at the end of Allama Hilli, but especially during the Safavid dynasty. That's when the transition happened. How did Iran become Shia, for example? They say, according to some historians, that the environment, remember this and always remember this, the impact of politics and sociology in the world around us has an impact on religion, whether we realize it or not. For example, how did England become Anglican? How did it follow the Anglican church? Before it was not Anglican. They had their own church, for example, in England. King Henry, who was ruling over there, he wanted to divorce his wife. What did he do? Divorce his wife. The church said, this is never going to happen. This is completely forbidden. Till death do us part. You cannot violate this. He said, I don't need you. He got rid of the whole church and formed his own church. These cycles repeat, remember. The same thing they said happened during the time of Allama Hilli. The ruler wanted to divorce his wife, and it's Sunni Islam that's established there. By the way, we sometimes say, especially discussing Eid-e-Zehra, in an academic environment, we have to be honest about these things. Unity is very important, don't get me wrong. But the definition of unity in your mind, everyone's mind is different. In the first thing in philosophy is you have to define terms. If you do not define terms and come to a common term, everyone has a different understanding. We say unity, someone thinks unity means compromise. Unity does not mean compromise in aqidah in any way. Shaheed Mutahari, and my opinion, gave the best description of what is meant by unity. Ayatollah Mutahari, he says, look, there's three options. There's one option, is unity means that you take the majority opinion and you impose it on the minority opinion. You take the Sunni view in the Sunni world, impose it on the minority view, the Shias, so everyone follows Sunni Islam. This is one option. This is option number two, is you take what's common between the majority and the minority and you make a new form. You take Shia, Sunni, you merge it, you form a new one. So the first one is Sunni imposed on Shia, that's the first option. So it's only Sunni. Second one is you take what's common between Shias, you take what's common between Sunnis, take what's common, remove what's different, you form a new Sushi Islam. Second option. Third form is where you come forward and say that it has nothing to do with aqidah, it has nothing to do with belief system. Your deen, lakum deenakum waliya deen. Your religion, my religion, my religion. He didn't use the word sushi, he added that. At the same time, when it comes to this third level, he said, look, as part of this, it doesn't have anything to do with aqidah. It has only to do that if someone is a Muslim, or a human being for that matter, but he used the word Muslim, you say that their life, property, honor, and dignity is sacred. Therefore, I do not do takfir on them. You see how people say some Shias are kafirs. Some Muslims say this, and they do takfir, and they legitimize the spilling of the blood. So he says, with respect to the first option, the minority would never accept. If you take the Sunni view and impose it on Shias, the Shias would never accept. So this is not an option. He said the second is not an option because the differences that exist between the two groups, they exist for good reason. They'll never compromise on that. So the second is not an option. He said the only logical definition of unity is that it has nothing to do with beliefs, it has nothing to do with aqidah, it has nothing to do with aqaid. It only has to do with that person's life, property, honor, dignity is sacred. And I won't put takfir on them, and I don't call them kafir. You don't call me kafir, I don't call you kafir. When people start thinking that this compromise, unity means compromise, that's when the issues arise. This is what we need to make sure we have common terms, otherwise we get confused. That's why it's so important to have these things. We have to be honest about it, because the history is dark. Do you know when they conquered, after Rasulullah, what some people did who were rulers was, you cannot sugarcoat it. When the second Khalifa, historians, not my words, when the second Khalifa came to power, he started conquering other territories. And he did dhulm, you cannot sugarcoat this. For example, what? Not only on lives, he did dhulm on other things, on knowledge. Let me say what? They conquered the Library of Alexandria. Today, the largest library in the world is the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. At that time, the largest library, the largest database of knowledge on the planet was the Library of Alexandria. They conquered over Alexandria in Egypt when they did the conquest of Egypt. And they said, what should we do with this? He thought about it for a second. I don't know if he thought about it. He said, burn the whole library. Why? He said, if there is something in this that is with the Quran, it is repetitive, it's redundant. We don't need it. And if it's against the Quran, it's a bid'ah. He said, burn the whole library. You burn the whole library? This is what has happened on the watch of certain rulers. Now, come back to Persia. Come back to Iran. How did it become Shia? I gave you the example of England and how it followed the Anglican church. Now come back. The same thing happened. The ruler in Iran, he says, I want to divorce my wife. So he called all of his wazirs, who were not Shias at that time. He said, look, I want you to, this is what happened. Last night I got angry and I said to my wife 3 times, talaq, talaq, talaq. Divorce, divorce, divorce. Of course, this is not how we do it. This is how it was for them at that time, right? This is how it is. He said, look, I was in anger and I was in rage. I got upset and I said it 3 times to my wife. They all said, look, according to our rules, there's no way around it. You've divorced her fully. You have to marry someone else and then finish that marriage and then come back. And then she has to come back. He said, no way, I'll never let this happen. So he said, is there anyone else who has another view? They said, there's one who's the Imam of the Rafidis, or the scholar or the alim of the Rafidis, the rejectors. Rafidi meaning rejectors. Rejecting who? The first 3 Khulafa. They would call the Shias that. He said, look, call him. He has a different view. He said, what's his view? And he gave a beautiful dalil. They called Alama Hilli. When they called Alama Hilli, he said, this is the issue. He said, look, I was upset and I was angry and I said 3 times to my wife, divorce, divorce, divorce. Talaq, talaq, talaq. They said that I have to go through this long process. I'm not going to go through this process. Do you have a solution? Alama Hilli is attributed to have said, what's the issue? He said, you only said it once. He said, what do you mean once? He said, you only said divorce once. It only matters once. He said, what do you mean? He said, when you said, based on their logic, when you said divorce once, the divorce happened. If the divorce happened, then when you said it the second time you said divorce, it has no meaning. Why? He said if it's already divorced, then it's like saying divorce to a woman who's walking down the street who you have no connection and relationship to. You say to her randomly, divorce, divorce, divorce. You have no connection to her. What are you divorcing? So he said the first one may count, but the second and third don't count. He said this logic makes sense to me. And then there were sensitivities towards Shiism that emerged. But definitely after the Safavid dynasty, there was Shiism, Allama Majlisi in this era, that emerged. But in Iran, in the practicing Shia community there, would they necessarily debate Allah, for example? Although you won't have that typically. Would they debate, for example, Rasulullah? No, 97, 98% already believe in Rasulullah. Would they debate on Amir al-Mu'mineen? No, they're followers of Ahlul Bayt. Why would they debate on Amir al-Mu'mineen? So these secondary, tertiary levels issues become issue. My marja, your other issues become the issue. Similarly, when you come to Iraq or other places, for example, Iraq where you have 65, 70% Shia population, for example, and other Ahlul Sunnah, for example. But they believe in Allah, they believe in Rasulullah, everyone believes in Rasulullah, everyone believes in the Shia community, believes in Amir al-Mu'mineen. So these issues emerge. Here, what are the issues and the challenges we face here? Here in America, do people debate on Amir al-Mu'mineen when you go to college, university, school? People may not even know who Imam Ali is here. If your neighbors or people, your colleagues, they know Muhammad Ali the boxer, they don't know who Muhammad Ali is named after. So Amir al-Mu'mineen is not primary on their list. By the way, you can get him on the list. How? In your email signatures at work or whatever, add one quotation of Amir al-Mu'mineen from Nahjul Balagha, from the back, put it in your email signature, put it in your offices, put it at work, and just write Ali at the bottom, or Imam Ali, whatever you want to write. There are universal sayings of Imam Ali that will impact the whole world. For example, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, hours of leisure pass away like summer clouds. Therefore, do not waste the opportunity of doing good. Is there any religion in that? Is there any madhab in that? They will benefit, the world will benefit. But people typically, Imam Ali is not on the radar. Is Rasulullah the primary concern? They may know who Rasulullah is, not necessarily primary concern. In America, you have to prove Allah from scratch. You have to prove God from scratch. In the West at large, in the world at large. First of all, you are using the Quran as your evidence of the base of your religion. First, prove that's logical. Prove that's God's word. That's the first discussion. Prove that God exists. So you have to have istidlal and proof as to why Allah exists. Then you come to Tawheed Adalat. You have to explain this. You have to understand it first so you can explain it to others. Everything else is secondary to that. Then we build on that. If we don't answer these questions, these issues will become major issues that we're facing in our world. Fatima Eid-e-Zehra will become every night. Sallu ala Muhammad wa What is her position? What is her maqam? I don't know. I can just give glimpses that we can think of. Shah Ismail Safavi, they say, the Safavi ruler. There was a debate going on during his time. They said the debate was Hur good or bad? Because there was a debate going on at that time, that Hur, up until the moment where he came to the camp of Imam Hussein, before that moment that he came, everything in his life was negative. He was one of the biggest criminals. He's the reason that he ended up, Imam Hussein and his family were camped there in Karbala. So there was a debate. Will Allah forgive him for this one moment? That one moment he comes on the good side, but what about all the other things that he did that were wrong? What's the issue? So there was a debate even amongst the scholars at that time, is he good, is he bad? Shah Ismail Safavi, according to narration, he said, I want to decide this once and for all. He said, exhume the body of Hur. Take it out, the body. He said, you cannot do this. How can you do this? How are you going to do this? The scholars and the people that advise said, you cannot do this. It's impossible. This is something that is sacrilegious. You're going to violate his sanctity? He said, do it. Get it done. The narrations say they exhumed the body of Hur. And when they exhumed it, this was about 400 or 500 years ago, they found the body exactly fresh as it was yesterday that Karbala happened. But it didn't stop there. The narration says that the same way the riwayat in the narration say that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had tied something around the forehead of Hur. Because there was blood flowing from there. And that was the handkerchief of Fatima Eid-e-Zehra. At that point in time, he said, I want that for myself. Now, a king can say that. Normal people may not be able to say that. But he's ruling over everything. He said, they said, is this not evidence enough for you? The body came out fresh. Are you still going to violate it and remove that? He said, I want it, they said. As soon as they tried to remove it, they said fresh blood began to gush out. At that point in time, he understood, he got his answer. He said, put it back, put the body back, bury the body. He was on the right path. You see, when Aba Abdullah picked up Hur, hugged him, and said, "Oh Hur, I have forgiven you and my Lord has forgiven you," that was truth, that was haqq. Because only the son of Fatima al-Zahra could have said that. Who else could have said that? And that word was not just a word, that was reality, and it was witnessed there at that moment. I will translate. The poet says, "Jal rahe hain jo diye, unko bujhaya jaye. Aaj bas shamme mawaddat ko jalaya jaye. Aaj bas shamme mawaddat ko jalaya jaye. और शाम वालों ने ये दस्तूर बना रखा है, हार कर नेज़ों पे कुरान उठाया जाए." शाम वालों ने ये दस्तूर बना रखा है, हार कर नेज़ों पे कुरान उठाया जाए, और खाक पर बैठ गए हैं जो मसाइब सुनने। हक तो ये है कि उन्हें सर पे बिठाया जाए, हक तो ये है कि उन्हें सर पे बिठाया जाए। और हजरत हुर का तो पहले भी अकीदा ये था, हजरत हुर का तो पहले भी अकीदा ये था, बिनते अहमद का कभी दिल ना दुखाया जाए। हजरत हुर का, the poet says, Hur's view even before Karbala was that you never break the heart of the daughter of Rasulullah. Because when Hur put his hand on the horse of Imam al-Hussein, at that point in time the narration says, Imam al-Hussein said, "May your mother mourn you." He said that, "May you die. That what have you done? You stopped me, the son of Fatima al-Zahra." And the narration says, Hur looked back and said, "If your mother was anyone except Fatima al-Zahra, I would have said the same thing." If your mother was anyone else, I would have responded. That means he had some understanding of who Fatima al-Zahra was. He had some understanding of who the Ahlul Bayt were. That saved him. That protected him from eternal damnation. So never think, this is one glimpse into the maqam of Fatima al-Zahra. We cannot understand. What did Imam Askari say? The hujjah on us is our mother, Fatima al-Zahra. You can spend your whole life. That's why Ayatollah, I often mention, Ayatollah Najafi Marashi, he dedicated his whole life to books. The largest library in Asia, they say, Najafi Marashi Library in Iran. He said, my son, never forget to make sure that you do three things with respect to Fatima al-Zahra, always in your life, in his will and his wasiyah. He says, look, make sure you memorize khutbah fadakiyah, the khutbah fadak. When Sadat would go, when they were exiled, when they had to leave from Arabia and go towards Persia and go on towards India, the one thing that they would always make their youngsters memorize was the khutbah fadakiyah by heart. Because that was part of the identity. Ayatollah Najafi Marashi says, if you do nothing else, make sure you memorize this. Why? And learn this and study it. Because some of the biggest intellectuals of the Arabic language have neglected this language, this khutbah. It's something that you should never forget. He says, number two, never forget the tasbih of Fatima al-Zahra. It will help you in the most difficult times. Not just after salah, he says, in every moment in time, recite this, it will help you. Not just running through it and breezing through it, but stopping and contemplating. This is what Rasulullah gave as a gift. It will help you in the most difficult time. And he says, number three, my son, never forget in the qunut of salat to say بحق فاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها أن تصلي على محمد وعلى آله. But as Dr. Ali Shariati says, Fatima is Fatima. Who can explain Fatima? Nonetheless, there is something that I want to highlight here. The world we're living is in a different world. Us brothers, oftentimes, we blend in. People may blend into society, people don't know. I remember I was in New York City, and I was on Brooklyn Bridge. And this individual comes to me, two young guys who were dressed in suits. They asked me, "Are you Jewish?" And he doesn't know. He just stopped and asked me because he was Jewish himself. So I said, "My name is Hebrew, because Shabir is a Hebrew name, but I'm not Jewish." What am I saying? Somebody may stop you and say, "Are you Italian? Are you Russian? Are you French? You blend into society." But who do not blend in are the sisters when you wear hijab. Why do I say this? The University of Hawaii did a study where they looked at what is the most prominent indicator of someone's religion in the world today. And I often mention this, and I remind you. They said number 2 on the list was the turban that the Sikhs wear. You know our Sikh friend? You remember the Gurdwara that was shot up in your state? They shot it up thinking they were Sikhs. No, they thought they were Muslims. You see, we are not at odds and we are not at problems. We're not at odds with Christianity. We're not at odds with Judaism. We're not at odds with Hinduism. We are not at odds with Sikhism. We are all at odds with jahl, with ignorance. Because ignorance is what killed those individuals in the Gurdwara and hurt them. Because that person thought they were Muslim, they were attacking Muslims. Today those were Sikhs 2 years ago. Tomorrow that may be one of our ulama who's wearing amama. They don't know the difference. Or do they know the difference? We need to build bridges with these communities. Nonetheless, the University of Hawaii study said number 2 on the list was the turban. Number 1 on the list, according to the researchers at the University of Hawaii, of the most prominent indicator of someone's religion in America today is hijab, that Muslim sisters wear. Hijab. No second ways about it. No two ways about it. But I need to mention something here. We mentioned last night that the suicide rate, the attempted suicide rate amongst young Muslims is the highest in America. And the numbers are 12%, as I mentioned, double of the next group. That means 12 out of 100 have attempted. And believe me, in my travels, in our community, it's happening. No one's talking about it, but it's happening. Behind closed doors. People are attempting. Why do I say this? We have to understand the psychology of the zaman and makan and the issues that a young person is facing here. You as a parent may come forward and say, wear hijab, and if you don't wear hijab, you're bad and you're this. That doesn't work. It may work, but it only will work for a certain time. If you force someone to wear it, believe me, as soon as they get freedom, it won't happen anymore. As soon as they hit university, as soon as they leave town, it won't happen. You have to accept it from the heart. Otherwise, it won't last. That's the key here. Why do I say this? I'm saying this because if you ask, and researchers have asked young Muslim girls, what are the pressures that you face? Why is it that you are facing this? We are seeing people who used to wear hijab, they're no longer wearing hijab. It's happening everywhere. Now one way is to say, oh, you should be and you're bad in this. Hold on a second. Try to put yourself in the shoes of that person for a moment before judging. Because it's rough, it's not easy. The sisters are saying we face 2 pressures at least, if not more. What's the pressures? One pressure is external pressure. External pressure meaning what? I walk down the street in Milwaukee and someone passes a comment, you know, you don't have to wear that here. Did you not see what happened in New Jersey? Just the teacher who pulled the hijab from the girl's head, said you don't have to wear this just a few days ago, you didn't see this? So this is happening in our watch. So they said, oh, you don't have to wear this here. Meaning what? You're being forced to wear it. That's the implication in the statement, number 1. So I have to answer external pressures of people saying I'm being forced to wear this, and I have to answer them externally outside these walls, number 1. And then number 2, I have to answer internal pressures. Internal pressure means what? Inside the mosque, inside the Husayniyah. That for example, maybe 1 or 2 hairs is showing, and then people say, oh, no, your hijab's not right. And I remember one sister asked me, every time they go, one sister asked me, this young girl, she said, Mawlana Sayyid, can you please tell me, why are na-mahram men so concerned with my hijab? What do I tell this girl? Now look, hijab is hijab, follow your marja. I'm not telling anyone not to do it at all. And it's very clear according to what the Maraj have said. But I'm just trying to let us empathize for a moment. The pressure internally is that I have to, if maybe 1 or 2 hairs is showing, or for example, sometimes the hijab is fine, but the clothes are too tight, you have to hear the objections from everyone. Is this hijab? We call this hijab, things like this. Then there's a third pressure. And believe me, the emails that I get, the third pressure sometimes is when a sister starts wearing hijab, the first opposition that she faces is from her own family, her own relatives, her own close one. They say, why do you want to wear that? Why do you want to wear that? Why do you want to look like, other comments people have? So imagine, what is this sister to do? I'm trying to help us get a glimpse into the pressures that young people are facing. What is leading that number in the Muslim community to be so high? What's the psychology behind it? Next level. San Francisco State University. We need to know this data. San Francisco State University put out a study that asked 3 questions. It said, look, number 1, with respect to Muslims in America, how many of you, they asked the subject of the study, for example, when it comes to your Islamic identity, you would avoid mentioning that you're Muslim, number 1. You would avoid telling other people you're Muslim, number 1. Number 2, can you be Muslim and American? Or is there a contradiction there? That was the second question. Number 3, how many of you would deny being a Muslim? If other people said, you're a Muslim? No, I'm not a Muslim. The researchers found interesting numbers. They said at the first level, with respect to people avoiding telling other people they're Muslim, they found 1 in 3, 33% of young Muslims in America avoided telling other people they're Muslim. If someone had pride, would they avoid telling others? We use symbols. That shirt that you got, if it has a nice logo, don't you pop the logo out? You hide the logo? If you were a Muslim and you are proud of it, you would tell other people. Would you not? 33% are saying we'd avoid. The second level, can I be Muslim and American? Do you know what the researchers found? 50% of young Muslims in America said, I don't know if I can be Muslim and American. What are we doing here? If we've not explained this. Do you know that the debate in America, the founding fathers of America, Thomas Jefferson and the likes, when they came forward, this debate happened in the 1700s in America. Can a Muslim be the President of the United States over 200 years ago? They all categorically said that a Muslim can be the President of the United States. Furthermore, you go to the Supreme Court of the United States of America in Washington, D.C. There you will find, in the stonework, you will find certain lawgivers that are etched in stone there today. You will find Hammurabi. You will find others. You will find, for example, Moses, Musa, and the 10 Commandments etched there in stone. Till this day, in that row, you will find an individual by the name of Muhammad, Rasulullah, as one of the greatest lawgivers in history. In fact, CARE in the 90s tried to get it removed. They said, we don't make statues or images of Muhammad, Rasulullah. And the Supreme Court said, thank you, but no thank you. This is out of respect of his law giving to the society. In fact, Thomas Jefferson, read a book called Thomas Jefferson's Quran. When Congressman Keith Ellison from Minnesota, when he went to Washington, D.C., he was a Muslim, the first elected Muslim representative. When he was elected, he said, I want to swear in on the Quran, not because I don't believe in the Bible. That's not my holy book, at least not this Bible. So they went and accommodated him. One of the beautiful aspects of America, they accommodated him. When they accommodated him, how did they accommodate him? They went to the Library of Congress and they got over a 200-year-old copy of the Quran. But which Quran? That Quran belonged to Thomas Jefferson himself. At that time, tort law in America, civil law, was influenced, according to some historians, was influenced by Islamic law. You see, if you don't know this history, then you begin to debate, can I be Muslim and American? The answer is categorically, it's not Muslim or American, it's Muslim and American. Remember, my young ones, especially study debate. When you study debate, you realize something called a false dilemma. In debate, you open two doors. One door says, you're either with us or against us. It's called a false dilemma. I can open a third door. I say, I'm Switzerland. I'm neither with you nor against you. I'm neutral. You have to understand this and frame the conversation in an appropriate way. You can be Muslim and American, as you should. Number one. Number two. Number three, the researcher said, if you are in a gathering to young Muslims, if someone said, are you Muslim? How many of you would deny it? They found that 1 in 6 young Muslims would say, even if they said, are you Muslim? And they were a Muslim, they would say, no, I'm not Muslim. They would deny it. This is how, post 9/11, I mentioned this. I remember life before 9/11. Many of you may remember the life before 9/11. After 9/11, the psychology and the psyche of young Muslims, and Muslims at large, young and old, doesn't matter, completely changed. We need to understand what's going on. Why? Because there's a narration, and listen to this very carefully, on authority of Sheikh al-Saduq, Ayatollah Wahid al-Khurasani. Ayatollah Wahid al-Khurasani is one of the Alam Maraja of our time. Sayyid Sistani and Ayatollah Wahid al-Khurasani was involved. These were big students of Sayyid Khoury. Ayatollah Wahid al-Khurasani says, Sheikh al-Saduq, on authority of Sheikh al-Saduq, he says, we have an authentic narration, riwayah, that says, those who die with iman in their hearts during the zaman, in the time of ghaibat, they will get the reward and the ajr of 1,000 of the shuhada of Badr and Uhud. Hold on a second. They said, Ya Rasulullah, Yabna Rasulullah, why this reward? Shaykh Saduq is narrating. Why this reward for someone who was not in Badr, they were not in Uhud, and they were living during the time of the zaman of the ghaibat of the Imam, they get the ajr and the thawab of 1,000 of the shuhada of Badr? Because it's not going to be easy. The narrations say, you will be sifted and sifted and sifted until very few of you remain. You know the 49ers, the football team? How did that name come? Do you know how California became California? 1849, they had a gold rush. You know gold rush? People moved westward. They were looking for gold. So they would take their nets and they would put it in the river. And when they would do it, they would shake it. And the mud would go down and the stones would go down. Sometimes they would see something that shines. That was gold. Many times they didn't see anything. Sifted and sifted and sifted until they finally found gold. Similarly, the narrations say you will be sifted and sifted and sifted until very few of you remain. The narration says someone will go with iman in the morning, they'll leave their house. When they come back, there will be no iman in their hearts. That's why the reward is so high, but the test and the challenge is also very high. Why do I say this? Develop that relationship with the Imam of your time. We are told in Bahrain, hundreds of years ago, in Bahrain, there was an environment where the ruler was there and his wazir came to him. His wazir, his advisor came. He came to the ruler at that time, and as is still, Bahrain was, the majority of people were Shia, but the rulership was Sunni. And he was an Ahl Sunnah ruler, he was not Shia. His wazir comes to him and he says, I have this pomegranate. So what's the interesting thing? He said the interesting thing about this pomegranate is etched on the skin of the pomegranate. On the pomegranate are the names of the first 4 khulafa. Khulafa Rashidin, as they say, not according to us. Rashidin means rightly guided. Of course, we don't accept them rightly guided. That's why we don't call them that. But it says Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. He says, therefore, this is the correct aqidah, this is the correct belief system. The ruler saw this, he said, call the Shia scholars. Call the Shia scholars. 3 of them came. They said, look, we have found this pomegranate. Pomegranate occurs in nature. This fruit is from nature. It has the names of these. What is your answer to this? This is God's sign that they are the rightly guided. Why don't you accept? You're wrong. They looked at it. Said, if you don't answer, the ruler said, if you don't answer this, this is, I will have all of your heads the next day. He said, look, hold on. The scholar said, the Shia scholar said, hold on. Give us 3 days. And we'll come back with the answer. He said, very well. They went, according to the narration, these 3 scholars, they went out into the desert, into isolation. And they began to do dua and munajat and do dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the wasila and the tawassul Imam Zaman. The first day, the first scholar comes forward, he does the ibadat, namaz, every ibadah, every dua. He does it. Nothing. Second day comes. Second scholar takes the lead. They're all praying together. But one's taking the lead. Second scholar. Whole day, morning, night, nothing. Third day, third scholar, morning breaks. It's the last chance. Ibadah, worship, nothing. On the third day, close to when the sun was about to set, the third scholar says, I saw a young youth come forward. No more than 40 years of age. He said, what's the issue? He was passing by in the desert. At that time, he may not have known. Things happen in a blur. Your life is on the line. He says, look, what's the matter? This horseman, young person's passing by. He says, we are in a dilemma. He says, what's the dilemma? He says, the ruler says that he's found a pomegranate. His advisor has found a pomegranate. It has the names of the first 4 khulafa etched on stone, etched in the skin. We don't know how. He said, what's the answer? He says, this is not an issue. What's the issue? He says, go back, go to the ruler, tell him you want to go to the house of the wazir. He says, when you go to the house of the wazir, tell him you want to go to the terrace. Go to the second floor, the terrace of the wazir. When you go to the terrace, he will get hesitant and he will get shaky. You won't want that. But insist and go. So when you go, you will find there in the corner, there will be a box. Go get the box. In the box, you will find something. And your problem will be solved. At that point in time, they became happy and they went back. When they went back, according to the narration, they went back and they saw the ruler. They said, look, we have the answer, we have the solution. So what's the answer? He said, we won't give it to you here. Hold on. So we have to go to the wazir's house. The wazir's house. Wazir said, why do you want to go to my house? What's in my house? He says, no, we want to go. That's where the answer is. He said, okay. So they go. The ruler and the wazir, they go. When they go there, at that moment in time, they get to the house. He said, where do you want to go now? We want to go to the terrace. He says, no, you can't go to the terrace. It's private. What are you doing? He says, no, we insist we have to go to the terrace. That's where the answer is. The ruler said, let's go to the terrace. They went to the terrace. When they went to the terrace, he said, now what? He said, let's go to the corner. The man's shaking, the wazir. They went to the corner. In the corner, they found a box. When they found a box, they said, let's open the box. They opened the box. Inside the box was a mold. You know a mold that you put things in? At that point in time, the pomegranate. The scholar came forward and he said at that point in time, and there was a pomegranate there. And he said at that point in time, open this pomegranate. When the pomegranate opened, black dust emerged. The ruler said, what's the meaning of this? He said, this is your answer as to why the names were written on the pomegranates. This wazir of yours, he takes baby pomegranates that are small and he puts them in the mold at a young age. And as they grow and grow, the mold has the 4 names written on them. and as they grow, they get the name imprinted on it. And then he removes the mold and he brought it to you. He was a fraud, a sham. He was not telling the truth. At that point in time, the ruler said, you are right, Shia Islam can stay here. And he got rid of his wazir, what he did with him at that moment. But here's what I wanted to share with you. The narration says, at that point in time, the scholars discussed amongst themselves, and they said that we had a conversation. That person who helped us, we believe, was the Imam of our time. But we asked him a question. What was the question they asked? They said, Yabna Zahra, O the grandson of Rasulullah and the grandson of Fatima the Zahra. For 3 days our lives were on the line. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. You waited the whole time and you came at the 11th hour on the 3rd day to save our lives. Why? The Imam, according to narration, looks back and said, why did you ask for 3 days? If you had asked for 1 day, I would have came on the 1st day. Your yaqeen and your certainty required you to ask for 3 days. I came on 3 days. Otherwise, where am I not? Remember one thing, we have on authority of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Aba Abdullah ibn Husayn ibn Ali. All of the Imams mention Imam Sahib al-Zaman, and they prepared and they said him. He said, my son in his ghaibat is like Yusuf, and his reappearance in his zahur, he is like Musa. Meaning what? We say, where is Imam al-Zamana? Is he on some, for example, Bermuda Triangle? People used to say these types of things, these nonsense. He's not any of those places. The Imam is not in any of these places. Where is the Imam? The Imam is amongst us. There are narrations that say the Imam is in Medina. There are narrations that the Imam is at Hajj during the Hajj seasons. There are narrations that say the Imam is at times in Masjid Jamkaran. There are narrations that say at times he is in Masjid Sahla. But here's the answer. The Imam, the third Imam says that he is amongst us. How? The same way that Yusuf had a ghaiba, that was when he became the finance minister of Egypt, after his brothers threw him into the well, and he was sold off, and he stayed in prison, and he interpreted the dreams. Eventually he became the finance minister of Egypt. His brothers many years later came, and they asked Yusuf for help. They did not know that that was their brother Yusuf, but Yusuf knew that was his brother. He was hidden in persona. Musa, Fir'aun was committing infanticide. He was killing infant males in alternative years. Every other year, he would kill all the newborn males. Because there was a prophecy that someone will come and overturn your empire. But what was makaru wa makar Allah wallahu khairul makirin, that the ayah says? That Allah plans and they plan and Allah is the best of planners. Fir'aun is in his house and Musa is being really raised and growing up in the house. Imagine, Fir'aun is looking at Musa, who he's raising as his adopted son, and he's saying, oh Musa, I am trying to make sure that that young boy who's going to take over my empire is not born. But he doesn't know he's talking to the one who's going to overturn his empire. The same way Yusuf knew. The Imam knows us. We don't know the Imam. That's why the narration says, when the Imam appears, people will say, this is the Imam. I saw him here, I saw him there, I saw him there. He helped me at this time, he helped me at that time. So the Imam is amongst us. But why did I recite that verse at the beginning? Baqiyatullah khairul lakum in kuntum mu'mineen. This is the verse that the narration say, when Imam Zamana makes his zahur, his reappearance in Mecca, when he makes it, at that point in time in Mecca, he will take a bay'ah from the 313 closest commanders. When he takes this, he will recite this verse. Baqiyatullah khairul lakum in kuntum mu'mineen. What remains from the provisions of Allah is better for you if you are mu'mineen. That is, what remains from the provisions of Allah is Imam Sahib al-Zaman. And our responsibility is to develop a relationship with that Imam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. But the first prerequisite to that is, what is our job and our responsibility in the Zaman of Ghaibat? Our job and our responsibility in the Zaman of Ghaibat, according to the ulama, is one, to keep your Iman and keep it strong. Don't lose it. You may think that's simple. It's not going to be simple. Allow me to explain something. Why? If you remember nothing else, remember this. Remember, I don't know when life will bring me back here, and I don't know what life has in plan. So I always recite as if it's my last time. Remember this, remember nothing else. I've studied a lot to get to this conclusion, so please bear with me. Imam Ali says, learn from the pages of history because there's a lesson in history for you and I. He says to his son, in letter 31 of Nahj al-Balagha, study and learn from the pages of history. Remember this. What is the history of other communities who came to America before us? Never forget this. 1654, the leaders of the Dutch West India Company, the most powerful company in the world. It was not a business, it was like a country in itself. Dutch meaning Holland, Netherlands. The West India Company, the East India and the West India Company. The leaders in the management of the Dutch West India Company, they wrote a letter to Peter Stuyvesant, who was the governor of New Amsterdam in 1654, almost 400 years ago. And they said, we want to move 23 members of our community from Brazil to your state of New Amsterdam. New Amsterdam, at that time, which we now call New York. It's now called New York. At that time, it was called New Amsterdam. Peter Stuyvesant was the governor of New York or New Amsterdam, wrote back a letter, one line. He said, I cannot accept these people to move. Why? He said, if they get sick, if they need money, if there's some issue, who will take care of them? I don't have the budget to do it. They wrote a one-line response. They said, you have nothing to worry about. They will be taken care of by their own. Own meaning who? They were members of the Jewish community. They came to New Amsterdam. 100 years later, these were the first Jewish immigrants to America, according to historians. 100 years later, 1750, historians said there was not a single person in the tri-state area who identified as Jewish. They're wiped out. They either intermarried, lost their religion or something. This was the first wave of Jewish immigrants who came to America, 1650. The second wave of Jewish immigrants who came to America. You can read a book called Religion and Immigration, edited by Dr. John Esposito at Georgetown University, if you want more information on this. He said the second wave of Jewish immigrants who came to America, they came to America in 1850, 200 years later, after the first batch. 200 years later, 1850. They said, we will not make the same mistakes that our ancestors made. So they said, we are going to bring our top rabbis, our top scholars, our top poets, our top linguists, our top culture. We're going to bring the whole culture from Europe to America. Despite all of this, historians said, the first generation of the second wave of Jewish immigrants who came in 1850, the first generation were Orthodox. The second generation were conservative. That means diluted a little bit. Orthodox, conservative. The third generation was Reform, even more diluted. The fourth generation were de-Judaized. That's the word the researchers used. They were no longer Jewish. Up to the year 2000, the Jewish community in America, they used to do something called the NJPS, National Jewish Population Survey. They would ask people questions. For example, how Jewish are you? What do you do that makes you Jewish? Is your identity important to you? And they asked them a very important question, which was this. Are you culturally Jewish, religiously Jewish, or are you both? Which one? The researchers found that 15% of them said that we are religiously Jewish, based on religion. 25% of them said we are both. And 60% of them said we are Jewish only on the basis of culture, nothing else. That's why there are many people here who said we are atheist Jews. Atheist Jews meaning what? We are culturally Jewish. We're not religiously Jewish. We don't believe in God, but we are culturally Jewish. When you ask someone at work or school, what's your religion? If you ask them these days, they'll say, I was raised Protestant. I was raised Catholic. I was raised Presbyterian. I was raised XY. Meaning what? Raised meaning what? My parents were, I'm not. I've heard with my own ears, I was raised Muslim. I was raised Shia. Don't think it's very far. It's in our own backyard. Why am I saying this? Remember the sacrifices that were laid for you and I to call ourselves Shias today. If we become doctors and lawyers and engineers and economists, that's all good and we should. But not at the expense of Iman. You have to keep both side by side, hand in hand. Otherwise, what's the point? There's many people who made money, who did well, but you will never get tranquility. The Quran says, "Ala bi-dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub." That tranquility that comes in the hearts comes from the zikr of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Which leads us to the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which
degrades us to the remembrance of God Almighty. Therefore, hold on and hold tight to your iman as much as possible. A few things that I need to mention as last messages. Remember one thing, the questions are getting more challenging and we need to raise the caliber. I was just in California for the first 12 days of Ayam Azah for Muharram. There were people who were coming to the majalis from our community who worked at NASA. NASA in Los Angeles, right outside of Los Angeles, they have a jet propulsion lab, JPL, jet propulsion lab. People from our community were coming from the NASA jet propulsion lab. They would finish work and they'd come to the Imam Barga. Do you know what jet propulsion is? Jet propulsion is one branch of what you and I call rocket science. Have you heard of rocket science? It's not rocket science. Whenever we want to say something is very difficult, we say it's rocket science. Why am I saying this? You're not going to go home or you're not going to go to work in the morning and be a rocket scientist and you're going to come to the mosque of the Husseini at night and shut off your brain. It doesn't work like that. Why? Our young ones and old alike, it's not just young, are living two lives. One life is in this mosque, one is outside these walls. Outside these walls is individualism. Inside these walls it's communalism. For example, individualism has its positives. Positives, for example, if I eat halal or vegan, they will make sure they have that at work for lunch for me. They'll accommodate. Here, for example, here's what's on the menu, you like it? Great, if you don't, here's the door. At the same level, outside is analysis, critical thinking. You come here, and everyone says it's all conformity. You get with the program or you get out. And so the young person's reconciling, what part of my mind am I supposed to be using? I'm not saying it's right or wrong, what I'm saying is we need to explain what's going on and why. Otherwise, we're going to lose people. People are going to slip by the wayside. There's a power in the Ahlul Bayt. There's a power in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a power in Islam. But if we don't explain it, we're going to lose people. Hijab, the issue of hijab. I'm waiting for that environment. Imam Sajjad, when he asked after Karbala, because the real work begins now. When he was asked what tormented you, what hurt you the most, he didn't say Karbala. He said Asham, Asham, Asham. What was hijab in the eyes of Imam Sajjad? And what is in my eyes? We need to give answers. I was in LA. In LA they have a museum called the Getty. It's right outside. It's near Bel Air. It's right by UCLA. It's on the edge of the city. In the Getty Museum, till this day, you can go now, they have a bust. It is a marble statue from the shoulders up of a lady from Italy, 350, 400 years ago. She's in full hijab. And when you read the description, it says that this lady, she's a Christian, she's not a Muslim. Why is she wearing hijab? It says she is wearing a scarf around her head because this is a sign of nobility, honor, and purity. Did anyone explain what's the significance behind the symbolism of hijab? I am waiting for us to inculcate and give that confidence to the sisters who wear hijab. And it's our responsibility to do that. Of that great lady, Tawakkul Karman, who won the Nobel Prize on the international stage wearing full hijab. They said, you are a Nobel Prize winner, Nobel laureate, you're on the global stage and you're wearing a scarf on your head. Why? How? Is this not backwards? Her answer still baffles me to this day. She says, when mankind emerged on this planet, mankind wore very little clothes. But as the intellect began to develop, we began to wear more clothes. Therefore, this hijab that I wear on my head, it is the height and the culmination of knowledge. To remove it would be to go back to the Stone Age. Who has that confidence to be able to look the global stage in the eye? Have we explained the concept behind hijab? Our job, this environment does not require, yes, firmness and discipline has its place, but believe me, if you don't get people to believe from their heart, you will lose people. Iman is always in the heart. Do you think Rasulullah didn't know the munafiqeen and what was in their heart? You think he doesn't know? He knows better than they know themselves. But unless it's in your heart entrenched, then people will not have it. We need to encourage young people. We need to not demolish them. Remember one thing. I have so many messages, I'm leaving everything. Remember this. People change. One of the things I get asked by youth, people say, youth are not coming. Hold on a second. Have you asked them why? What's going on in their lives? Many youth tell me, I used to come, but someone started a rumor about me. Maybe someone has a bad phase. Maybe someone had a rough patch. People change. Don't people change? If we learn anything from Karbala, don't people change? Zuhair bin Qayn. Zuhair
He dies on the plains of Karbala protecting Imam al-Hussein while he's reciting Salah. He's taking arrows on his chest. The poet says, Mehve namaz ran mein Saeed o Zuhair hai, Nusrat ki is namaz mein Niyat Hussain hai. The poet says that Zuhair and Saeed are taking arrows on their chest. They are reciting and praying the namaz of the Ishq of Hussein. That they are protecting Hussein ibn Ali. What level, what height of ibadah and worship. But where was this Zuhair ibn Qayn in the battle of Jamal? He was on the side of Talha, Zubair and Aisha. He switched. People change. Hur was on the camp of Yazid in the morning, he changed. Or in the night before, and he came to the right side. And the opposite is also true. Abdul Rahman ibn Muljam, la'natullahi alayhi, who killed Amir al-Mu'mineen. Before he killed him, he used to try to be one of the close companions and confidants of Imam Ali. Imam Ali looked at him and said, what will that day be like when you will assassinate me? He said, may I die before that day. What happened? He assassinated Imam Ali. Shimr bin Dil Joshan. Shimr, is there anyone worse than Shimr? There's Yazid and Shimr. Tied for first. Where was Shimr in the Battle of Siffin? He was on the side of Imam Ali. He was on the side of Imam Ali's change. Now, he did have loyalties, was he a mercenary? Issue is separate. But people go from good to bad, they go from bad to good. People change. Remember, have you ever seen your stock portfolio? Does it always go up? Does it always go down? Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, and it rotates. You hope it will trend upwards. Similarly, we hope our iman trends upwards. But who knows? Always do the dua that your final breath is on the path of Husayniyah. That's the most important dua. Because who knows? Today I'm here, who knows tomorrow? And tomorrow, who knows that person who's outside today? They could be here tomorrow. Remember one thing that one of the Urafa of the House of Qom said. Look at each person that you see, Muslim, non-Muslim, otherwise, look at each person as a potential project of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are a work in progress. And everyone has the potential to maximize their ability. Always remember that. Then and only then will we be able to develop and rise as a community. Encourage youth. Remember, it takes a village to raise a child. Think of each child and each young one in the community as your own child. That is when the community will flourish. That is when the society will flourish. And that is when the world at large will flourish. Final few points. I know I'm over time. I don't know when life will bring. The questions are getting more complicated. Remember this. MAO alpha. It's a gene variant. There's a book called Dr. Robert Sapolsky. He teaches at Stanford University. He's written a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. You know, you and I, we get ulcers because we have chronic stress. Day in, day out. Zebras also have stress. If you're running away from a lion, you have stress. But what happens is when a zebra runs away from a lion, the body shuts off all non-essential organs. And then after 3 minutes, if they survive, they have no stress because they're not thinking, is the lion thinking about me? Sometimes forgetting is good. This same Dr. Robert Sapolsky, he teaches a class called Behavioral Genetics at Stanford. In this class at Stanford, he said, we've known for a long time that my parents, my grandparents, their genes that they give me, they impact my skin color, my height, my physical appearance, my face, my eyes. But the same way, we now know that our genetics impact our behavior. So there's a gene variant that we know that's called MAO alpha. MAO alpha gene variant, according to Dr. Sapolsky, if someone carries this, they are more prone to antisocial violence. Meaning what? They were more likely to shoot up for example, a movie theater or something like this. But if and only if, and this is very important, if and only if they carry that gene and they experience childhood trauma, that activates the gene. What is the implication of this? The implication of this is in 5, 10, 15 years in law, if someone commits a crime where they shoot up innocent people, the judge will order that do a genetic test on this person. What's their genetic code? Epigenetics, what's going on? And when they say, does this person have MAO alpha? They'll say, check the box. Then they will call a psychologist and say, and a psychiatrist, hold on, do they have symptoms that they experienced childhood trauma? And if they did, check the box. That doesn't mean they won't go to prison. They'll still go to prison because we have to protect society. But that will impact the decree at the end. Do they go for life? Are they put to the death penalty? Or do they go for 20, 30 years? What's the issue? I'm saying this as one example. When people used to ask in the old days, what's the dalil of the existence of God? The example that I used to hear from the mimbar was, there was an old lady who she was using a chakki, a mill, and she was using a grinding mill, and she says, as long as I'm moving this, it works. As soon as I let go, it stops working. Therefore, there's God. You tell this to a young person today, say that's overly simplistic. That's not how the world works. The world's much more complicated than this. What am I saying? The questions are getting harder. Our answers have to keep up. Otherwise, we're going to lose people. Questions must be encouraged, and questions always need to be encouraged. However, the question must always be answered to the satisfaction of the person who is asking the question. Otherwise, what happens is, this is where the question, once the person who's asking the question wants the answer, this is the answer that's given, there's a gap. That gap over time begins to brew. Coffee brews, tea brews, and it spills over one day. That's when it leads to atheism and people leaving the religion. We have to answer. We need to move from a model of a monologue to a dialogue. We have to capture the questions that are in people's mind and have a two-way conversation. I'm not saying the majalis should stop. Majalis have their place, they're very important. But we need to make sure we hear the questions and we address them head on. Otherwise, we lose people. Why did I mention child trauma? This is one way of activating, and it's one gene that it impacts. In your houses, in your families, establish harmony. There are 4 layers. I mentioned to you this, I'm reminding this. Remember this. There are 4 layers. What should we do? What's the solution? I'm giving it to you right now. 4 square and the triangle model, the house model. 4 square and triangle. 4 square is what? Internal is the 4 square, triangle is external. What do? Family structure, madrasa, mimbar, and the company you keep. Make these strong. And internally, there's hope that we'll be strong. Externally, outside these walls, finance, media, civic engagement, political engagement. Outside these walls. We need to do this all as a community to thrive. Are you not seeing what's going on in Afghanistan? Are you not seeing what's going on in our world today? These are Shia victims. Pakistan target killings happen every other year, don't they? You need to get involved politically and get involved by voting. Vote for the honest candidate, the one that you believe is right, but be involved in that process. Money, mission, and membership. These are the 4 M's of civic engagement. We need to get involved outside these walls. Inside these walls, husband and wife, we need to give training to young couples before, during, and after marriage. We need to give them advice. Because otherwise, that's what leads to the trauma in the household. Because they don't know how to explain. Dr. Chapman is an expert on marital relations. He says, look, you have to be able to communicate with your spouse effectively. And not everyone has the same language of affection, the same language of love. Rasulullah says, a husband who says to his wife, I love you, will find that this statement will never leave her heart. This is not Hollywood or Bollywood. This is Rasulullah saying it. Why? Because when you go to the gas station, there are different degrees of fuel. 87, 89, 91, 93. Different cars have different requirements. Similarly, different people have different requirements. We think that everyone is the same as me. Dr. Chapman said, I had a patient or a client come into my office, and they said, my husband, I keep telling, she said, I keep telling my husband, fix the fan, fix the fan, fix the fan. He doesn't fix the fan. Dr. Chapman asked a few questions. He said, I understand his type. Go back for 2-3 weeks. Don't mention the fan. Just if you see that he sincerely does something that you appreciate, sincerely appreciate it. He takes out the trash, cooks something, whatever he does, sincerely, genuinely appreciate it if you appreciate it. Okay? 3 weeks later, she comes back to the office. Dr. Chapman said, what happened? He fixed the fan. He fixed the fan. How? He said, look, you didn't understand his type. He said there's different ways. Some people are motivated by words. Some people are motivated by touch, on the shoulder, on the hand. That's their language of affection. Some people are motivated by gifts, small gifts, just a card here and there, a flower here and there. Some people this there. Some people, they need time. They want your time. And some people want actions, actually doing something. You may say this is something out of the norm. Do you know, Imam Al-Kadhim says, if you like someone, if you have affection towards someone, tell them that, because that brings the hearts closer. If you have a friend, a brother, a relative, tell them you appreciate them. Touch. We have the tradition from Imam Baqir. It says what? That if you are angry, standing, sit down. If you are sitting, lay down. You've heard this very famous. But we don't continue it. What does it say after that? If you are angry with a loved one, touch them after they calm down. But touch them on their hand or shoulder, just because this touch has an impact. Touch has a big impact.
Further than this, Rasulullah, do you know that before Rasulullah, in the society in Arabia and Hijaz, nobody would show affection to their children. Rasulullah was the first one who would sit on the minbar, he would take Imam Hassan and Hussein and he would show affection, would hug them, kiss them. People thought it was weakness. He said, no, this is strength. Because otherwise what ends up happening, if the child doesn't have affection, they suffer in life. What's other? Imam Hassan is in i'tiqaf. Imam Hassan, final thing. Imam Hassan is in i'tiqaf. In i'tiqaf, you don't leave the masjid. When he's in i'tiqaf, a man comes, he says, Yabna Rasulullah, I am alone. Can you help me? He said, I don't have the money on me right now. He said, Yabna Rasulullah, okay, fine. The people say, you don't see Imam Hassan in i'tiqaf? Why are you bothering him right now? He said, hold on. He said, Yabna Rasulullah, I know you don't have the money on me right now. However, your word is very valuable. Maybe you can tell the person who I owe that give him some more time. As soon as he said this, the narration says Imam Hassan got up, he went towards his shoes. He picked up his shoes, the people said, Yabna Rasulullah, Imam Hassan, you're leaving the masjid in i'tiqaf? He looked back and he said, I heard from my father who heard from my grandfather Rasulullah that anyone who helps a believer in difficulty does more than 1,000 nights of worship, of ibadah. You haven't understood. And how many narrations on gift giving? And how many narrations on giving time to your loved ones? How many narrations on this affection? Build harmony, non-violent communication. We sometimes don't know how to express ourselves. I'm trying to protect our children from trauma. Non-violent communication. When the husband comes home, he says, he gets upset, maybe he had a bad day. So you do this and you do that. If you have something that you want to say, first say, I feel sad, or I feel upset. When maybe the shoes are left here, can you please not do this? Try to de-escalate the matter, not escalate and make it worse. That has an impact. Remember, children, they hear with their eyes. That is what they see is what their reality is. You can say whatever you want, but if the actions don't reflect that, it won't. Why am I saying this? We need to create a strong crop for Imam Zaman. Remember, there's humanism. Muslim and mu'min are advanced stages of human. First you must be a good human. Then a Muslim and a mu'min is a higher stage of being a good human. How can you not be a good human if you're a good mu'min? We need to understand that. But the first thing, develop the relationship and ask, what would my Imam want from me at this point in time? Final thing, the poet says, because it is Eid-e-Zehra, just 2 lines, just 4 lines actually. The poet says, "Ay bagh-e askari ke," and I will translate. "Ay bagh-e askari ke muqaddas tareen phool, ay kaaba-e furu-e nazar qibla-e usool, aa humse kar khiraj dil-o jaan kabhi wusool, aur tere baghair humko qayamat nahi qabool, dunya na mal-o zar na wizarat ke waaste, dunya na mal-o zar na wizarat ke waaste, हम जी रहे हैं तेरी जियारत के वास्ते। Not for wealth, not for this dunya, not for any income, not for any position in office, for nothing. O the son of Fatima al-Zahra, we are only living to see your ziyarah and when you reappear. That is what's most important in our minds. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless this holy gathering. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our ibadah that we did in the 2 months and 8 days. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless all the mu'mineen who are here, who are watching, whoever, all the mu'mineen across the globe. Anyone who's suffering from financial difficulty, Ya Allah, alleviate their financial difficulty. Anyone who's suffering from any illness, COVID or otherwise, Ya Allah, alleviate that difficulty from their life. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Imam Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman and allow us to be amongst his companions when he returns. Wa akhir da'wana and alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Sallallahu alayka ya Rasulullah, assalamu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, assalamu alayka ya Fatima al-Zahra, Sayyid Nisa al-Alamin, assalamu alayka ya Hassan al-Mustafa, assalamu ala al-Husayn, wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn, wa ala awlad al-Husayn, wa ala ashab al-Husayn, khususan Sayyidi wa Mawlaya Abul Fadl al-Abbas ibn Amir al-Mu'mineen. السلام عليك يا قصة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء. السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء. السلام عليك يا شمس الشموس ونيس النفوس أيها المدفون بأرض الطوس الراضي بالقدر والقضاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسحر الله مخرجك وزهورك ورحمة الله وبركاته.